And I tried to be sure that whatever I told them, they could depend on it. So I don't have any deep, dark secrets for how you get control or you get support. I think that the biggest support base comes from the local area. When you get an industry in a particular region, that becomes important, that region. And you have to see that that's imprinted on the legislators' minds in that region. Hey, here, you got a new industry out there. VOTEC was in the forefront of helping you get it. And when you do that, I think they want to support you then.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you talked about earlier, Dr. Tuttle, was right after you became state director, you had some internal challenges of establishing your leadership and your authority, and had to deal with some things early on. And my sense would be, is working with area school superintendents as they came on, there were some times when maybe your authority might have been challenged or your leadership was challenged. There's kind of like we talked with Larry earlier about some of the stories with Perky. There's a story that floats around the halls about one time when one particular superintendent got up and made a public statement about he didn't want any more of your staff in his building. Is there some truth to that story, and how'd that play out?
Right on. There's some truth to it. Since you brought it up, the story really was we were meeting at the VOTEC school at Duncan.
Yeah.
And the superintendents, they're all, I can't remember the word that I used to describe them, but they were kind of little Caesars in their own right.
I remember the word used, prima donnas.
Prima donnas. I called them prima donnas in their own right. Well, he took great, Ken was a guy, you had to understand Ken. I kind of liked the guy.
Yeah.
But you have to understand him. And one of the things that he didn't hesitate doing is challenging you to see how you reacted. Mm-hmm. And so he got up there and he let his belt out about 2 notches, and he told them that he was just sick and tired of State Department staff. And he didn't want any of them in his school again, ever. Well, you know, he would just, the longer he talked, the better it sounded to him, and the louder he got. And after, I just sat there and listened. I didn't say a word until afterwards he sat down. Well, of course, here was all these guys down there just looking at each other and wondering, well, how's he going to answer that? So I just got up and I said, Ken, appreciate knowing how you feel. No more of our staff's going to be in your school. I'm going to instruct them not to go in your school. Now you understand, though, that your school can't be accredited if my staff doesn't come up and do it. And if you don't get accreditation, can't send you any money. So I just feel like you need to understand that. And old Ken held up both hands and said, I give up.
He had reconsidered his position, right?
Yeah. He rethought it. This is my way of thinking is that, you know, I may disagree with a person, but as long as he treats me with a measure of respect, well, I'll do the same to him. Mm-hmm. And I'm not gonna, I didn't get upset to the point that I couldn't deal with any of them. Mm-hmm. But I've had several of them that we just really go to mat on our differences.
Well, in the early 70s, vocational education was the area VOTech school network. At least the foundational piece was in there. There were 7 or 8 or 9 VOTech schools. The economic development component was strong. Dewey Bartlett's administration had passed on, and we had the next administration, but the industry training program was there, and it was established. And vocational education began getting some pretty good exposure, doing some stuff for industry, and began to get pretty active with the adult education effort. And higher education decided, I think, if the story's correct, to challenge who in fact was going to be the server and provider of technical education to the adult population. Was it going to be the area VOTech school, or was it going to be the higher education system? Tell us a little bit about the early 70s and how that thing played out.
Arch was my legal man.
All right.
Let him tell you that.
I'm more than his legal man. I guess jailhouse lawyer, that'd be a good term. But I remember real well that Chancellor Dunlap and his board decided that we weren't going to be authorized to teach anything beyond the high school. That any adult training or any post-secondary training would be done in a community college or a college. And they put out a policy saying that's the way it was going to be. And I remember, I want to talk about 2 different things here, Leo, while I'm talking about this. Dr. Tuttle challenged Chancellor Dunlap, and I think he was always fair with him, always very frank, always complimentary of him. But they went to court, and we won the right to continue teaching people beyond the high school. And it was a marked, important decision as far as the state Supreme Court was concerned. And I thought that Dr. Tuttle also arranged for a good lawyer. Andy Coates was our lawyer.
Oh, really?
And he did a super job of presenting our case. But I remember how tense it was sitting around there with some of Dr. Tuttle's staff were there, and some of the Chancellor Dunlap's staff were there, and we were all watching the court. And one interesting thing was one of Dr. Tuttle's, my very best friend, Dale Creech, was sitting there on the other side of the fence that we were on because he was president of Northeastern A&M, and he was there supporting Dunlap. But anyway, we won that case. And that was a case where Dr. Dunlap and Dr. Tuttle went to the mat, and Dr. Tuttle won. There was another case. That was back when they were going to form a new state board of vocational education, and back to the Ling Temple Vote Day, LTV. And they had recommended one in which we would be a part of a board which the chancellor would be more or less chairman of, and it would be a super board to set aside from that. And we took that to issue with them, and Dr. Tuttle won that argument too, and got the separate state board of vocational and technical education. But they had in mind moving us to Oklahoma City, and Dr. Tuttle won that particular argument. And I think it's always been a great deal to be just this far away from the legislature, not an arm's distance, and it has worked out real well for us. But I can think of the times that Dr. Dunlap and the chancellor locked horns, while typically Dr. Tuttle would win because he had arguments presented which made sense. And certainly with the one when we went to court about adult education, just think what they would have changed the whole complex of the area VOTech schools if we'd lost that court case. Because we'd been strictly a secondary institution.
That's right.
And now some of the strongest programs we have are post-secondary.
That's right.
And some of the strongest support comes from those post-secondary students and the people who send individuals there to go to school. But I think another important challenge that Dr. Tuttle faced was how to work out this tightrope between the area vocational technical schools and the common schools vocational education program. And for a while there was a little feeling that Dr. Tuttle supported the area schools because he'd been the coordinator of area VOTech education before he became state director. And they worried a little bit about whether he was going to be fair with them. But I thought he did an excellent job of walking that tightrope and promoting things that were good for common schools and their vocational education programs as he was for the area VOTech school.
I think there were 2 or 3 of them. I don't know one was any more important than the other. The first challenge was finding a way to properly fund the area VOTech schools. If we hadn't been able to form districts where we could raise local money, we'd had just a very common system. And in my opinion, it never would have, because the state was not So I think that was an important thing that faced us. Along with it, after we got that constitutional amendment, it still wasn't easy to get a district form. The public school superintendents all thought that their levies would go down the drain if they formed a VOTEC district, and that the people might vote for that and not vote for theirs. But that doesn't true. In fact, it might have helped them to have the VOTEC districts, and I'm sure it never caused the levy any place to go down. Well, I don't know. The higher education issue was very important. And, you know, I was willing to put my reputation on the line because I thought it was so important that if we didn't win that, then we as well quit. Because if we'd have been controlled by higher education, especially Dunlap, why, nothing would have happened that would have been beneficial to us. So I suppose those two things were very important. There probably were others, if I recalled them, that you could add in there.
I suppose it speaks somewhat to the times once again, but wasn't one of your first acts as state director was to go for equity in pay between the male staff people and the female staff people?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, all home ec supervisors were paid below the level of other supervisors.
Yeah.
And
Health occupations was.
health occupations.
Matter of fact, they all were. I think even the Institute of Education, marketing education. But he leveled them all.
Yeah.
One of the big things was a favorite back 25 years ago was to accuse vocational education of teaching skills that are no longer needed, and that we just weren't teaching what was needed, and that there was some truth to that. But it wasn't the truth that so much of the area that we're teaching in, it was the fact that we didn't change within that area. We're still need machinists. Now we need different kinds of machinists, and you can't train them the same way that are training them even now, but certainly not 25 years ago. The same thing is true for most all of the vocational areas that we have and are teaching, is that we have to stay up to date with the technology, and we have to be willing to change. Our teachers have to be willing to change. We have to encompass a program that can provide for the changes that our teachers need and help them to change. The only problem we have is getting and keeping the people who are willing to change. What we may do is stub our own toes by not keeping the flexibility that's been built into this system for change.
Vocational education in Oklahoma was fortunate that Francis Tuttle came along at the time he did, because his vision and foresight is what brought us to the place we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there are many who share that same thought and agree with that.
Amen.
Well, I don't know if that's true or not. I'll tell you what. Well, it's been a career I feel most fortunate to have had. To see a time when we started with practically nothing. The only vocational schools we had when we started here was the residential vocational school at Okmulgee and 2 technical institutes, post-secondary technical institutes, 1 here on the campus and 1 in Oklahoma City. That was it. All the rest of vocational education has grown from that time. And so, you know, it's really been a pleasure to see the growth and see the success that growth has brought to the state of Oklahoma.
Hopefully after watching this video you get a little bit of a feel for the kind of leadership that Dr. Tuttle demonstrated and exhibited in his administration with vocational education. His insights, his visions, his analytical capabilities as it related to a situation and ability to chart a course to the future were unprecedented, certainly from the standpoint of the education field in the state of Oklahoma. Dr. Tuttle was a man who led with quiet resolve. He wasn't flamboyant. He wasn't a charismatic type leader, but yet he was one who commanded respect by his very presence, and I think is evidenced by his 2 deputies, Dr. Alexander and Mr. Hanson, even the way they paid respect to him in retirement on this panel. There's a saying that says, whatever an organization is when you take over is your inheritance. You inherited it at its current status. Whatever it is when you leave it is your legacy. And the difference between your inheritance and your legacy is a measure of your impact, a measure of your leadership. 20 years between Dr. Tuttle's inheritance and his legacy. And if you take a look at vocational education in the state of Oklahoma today, I think there's no question in anybody's mind that the measure of his impact is tremendous. A powerful leader. We lost Dr. Francis Tuttle in early 1997. Dr. Alexander and Mr. Hanson are both living in retirement in Stillwater, Oklahoma. But the future of vocational education lives on because their legacy lives on. It'll continue to have an impact on generations of Oklahomans to come and continue to be a positive factor on the economic aspects, economic development aspects of the state of Oklahoma. The future's bright, and charting that course into the future is Dr. Roy Peters. Dr. Peters, why don't you share with us just a little bit in closing about where vocational education's headed in the future?
Leo, thank you, and thank you for creating this situation and the environment with the panel that really brings Oklahoma's vocational education history to a level of understanding that I hope all of you have now that you viewed this video. Oklahoma's vocational education system is very alive and well today because of the great foundation that these 3 individuals built and many, many others built for our system as we know it today. One of the things that Dr. Francis Tuttle spoke often about was the need to change, the need to be sure that we were reflecting our society's needs within our vocational technical education system, the need to structure our system where it was flexible, where it really was designed to meet the needs of business and industry. And if we serve that need, we then would be serving the needs of our students and of our state very, very well. Francis Tuttle, Arch Alexander, Larry Hanson, and Leo Presley deserve a great deal of credit for bringing us a video that allows us to understand that rich history and to build on the history as we would be expected to by these great men of our past.